Hi. Can you guys hear me? Can you wave or like or do something if you can hear me okay? Can you hear me? Oh God, my cat's just walked in. Good, you can hear. Oh. Just while we're waiting for people to come along, it's going to take a few minutes. I'm sorry I'm late this evening. Ironically, Frankie, you might hear, he's having a meltdown. So it's not perfect every night in this household. He's teething really badly at the moment, bless him. So Jim is looking after him, but that crying noise is really stressing me out. Hope everyone's well. Hope you're all having a nice weekend. I'm just waiting for a few more to join. Feel free as we go along to ask questions. I will do my absolute best to answer them as we go along. I've got lots and lots of questions to go through. Wave at a couple of people. The crying noise gets to you and nothing's working. Oh my God. We in general don't have very cry babies, so tonight is really tugging on my heartstrings. He is teething so badly. Maisie went down at 6:30. It's now 8:05, and actually it's just gone silent. Jim's got him, but it's literally, it's not making me feel good leaving him, but he's okay. So we've got a few more joining now, so we're going to kick off. We're going to start, so we're going to talk everything about sleep. So forgive me if I look down at my notes, because I do have to kind of look down at the questions I've been asked, because I want to cover as much as possible. Hello everyone new that's joining in. And excuse my absolute mess of a hair. So we're going to talk about sleep tonight. Oh, Frankie's screaming again. Sleep obviously being essential for humans, babies. So there's 4 things that are really essential for babies. We have sleep, we have food, warmth, and emotional support, love. If you get any of the other 3 pillars wrong, so let's call it the 4 pillars. So you've got sleep, food, warmth, and love. So if the feeding is wrong, if warmth is wrong, or they're not emotionally supported, sleep is generally the first thing that kind of suffers. So I've had a few people ask some questions. So how much sleep do babies need? So lots of people who follow me on the Instagram have got very, very new babies. I think we see a lot of things in the media of people walking around with their babies, all smiley, lovely. But actually, in generally in the first 6 weeks, babies sleep a lot. They sleep pretty much all day. They don't do a lot else but sleep, eat, poo. That is the fact of the matter. I have people contact me saying my baby's really sleepy, they don't have much wake time. That is totally normal, and it's definitely to be encouraged. Hi everyone new coming in. We are the only mammals that aren't fully developed at birth. So what I mean by that is when a puppy is born, when a kitten is born, they can fend for themselves. So they can get up, they can walk off, they could fend for themselves. So as humans, actually, we're not fully cooked until really kind of about 3 to 6 months longer than the gestational period in us. So they're very, very dependent on us. And obviously in the first 6 to 12 weeks, it is literally, like I said, it's survival for them and for us as well. So I'm not just talking about sleep for babies, I'm going to talk about sleep for us as well, because that's really, really important. And certainly in the first few weeks having a baby, be kind on yourself, because the lack of sleep can really, really catch up on you. I know I had, when I first had the babies and I was really suffering with sleep, thinking, what the hell have I done? Our babies were totally we planned 1, we got 2. They were totally planned, but actually the tiredness that came with it, initially, just from going through birth, the days after when you've got lots of people kind of visiting you, it's really exhausting. So be really, really kind on yourself in those first couple of weeks. Eat well as well, and try and keep visitors as little as possible. An idea for anybody that is pregnant at the moment is we actually said no visitors for 2 weeks, and that might seem a little bit harsh. We allowed close family and also very close friends, but apart from that, nobody was coming in my door. I looked like absolute shit, and I'm not making cups of tea for somebody when I've just given birth, because that's what you kind of feel obliged to do. So as an idea, if you don't have a baby shower, have a post-baby shower, have a meet the baby, hire somewhere out like you would a baby shower room, and let everyone come and meet you in one go, get it done in one day, so they're not kind of inundating you. Anyway, I've digressed kind of there. So we're going back to sleep. So certainly the first 3 to 4 weeks, definitely, possibly up to 6, babies are sleeping pretty much most of the time. After that 6-week period, you are going to notice a little bit of a step change. They'll have a little bit more of wake time going on. If you've got premature babies, and often multiples can be, they can be premature. They're likely to come before 37 weeks. They need to put on body fat. They need to grow. So encourage sleep as much as you can. Try not to be selfish to your own wants of wanting to cuddle the baby all the time, keep the baby awake. It will often backfire. That baby needs to sleep to grow, to be healthy. So sorry, Jade just said my family were in and out while we were in hospital for 3 weeks. It's actually really annoying. I just wanted time to recover and for babies to be healthy. It's so true, because no matter what kind of birth you have, you still need that bit of time for yourself and with your partner and with your babies, just to kind of bond and just to kind of catch up on everything. So babies under 6 months old, how much sleep do they need? They need approximately 14 to 17 hours of sleep a day. So bear in mind they're sleeping in blocks throughout the night. We'll talk about sleeping through. I will cover that quite in depth. But they also need naps during the day. So quite a few people have kind of asked me how many naps are needed for babies. Now, please bear in mind that all babies are different. Everyone's family situations are different. So I'm only kind of giving this information as to what we've done, and the clients that I work with, what I recommend for them. So certainly up until a baby is about 6 months of age, you need to be aiming for about 3 naps a day. So what I'd say is, say your day starts at 6 a.m. or 6:30, they have their feed, put them straight back to bed, and they need to go back to bed for about an hour and a half. Then the baby's up, you'll have a bit of wake time with them, often feed again, bit of playtime, and then usually around kind of 10:30, 11 o'clock, they'll need another nap of half an hour to an hour ideally. Very important is a nap really in the afternoon for a couple of hours if possible. I'm going to talk about how to possibly get your babies to nap longer, and Rachel, you've just asked, how do you control the baby's naps? Mine just tend to nap when they want. I am going to talk through with everyone about sleep cues, because I think it's quite interesting, the cues that we miss, that we don't realise. If the baby is showing certain behaviours, we don't realise that it's a tiredness cue that they want to sleep. So I'm going to talk through that. I'll talk through routine as well. Now, not everyone agrees with routine. I do, but if families don't want strict routines in place, then I totally support that as well. I believe certainly a twins and multiples routine is essential. I don't know if anyone disagrees, or if you agree that routine's essential, perhaps give that comment a like. I think it's really, really important to start a routine from day one. A lot of people have said to me, oh, you can't put babies in a routine from day one. Well, I can tell you, Frankie was in special care. Those babies are in a routine. So anybody that says babies can't be in a routine from day one, well, you just... nobody wants to visit a special care unit, but they can be in a routine from day one. got easier for us routine wise, but didn't start until 6 months. Some people start a routine later on. Somebody did ask me a question, I'll go through all the questions about, can I start a routine later on? Absolutely. And then Chanel, you've just asked, when my baby gets tired, he fights being put down for the nap, how do you manage that? I'm going to talk about sleep cues in a minute. So that's napping. Once a baby hits about 6 months and perhaps weaning is introduced a bit more, you're probably going to find that they're going to drop down to 2 naps a day. So that'll be a morning nap and an afternoon nap. One thing I do recommend when I'm speaking with people is that if you can please try and make sure that you're at home for at least 1 nap during the day. It's really important that babies sleep in a quiet environment, not in their buggy in a shopping centre. It's fine for 1 nap, but not all of your naps. So don't go out perhaps on an 8-hour trip daily. Obviously, your life doesn't go on hold, so it can happen every now and again. But so majority of your time, have a routine. Have one of those sleeps at home, either obviously in their cot in your room or in their room, darkened if you can, ideally. So another thing I'm going to talk about, so we're going to talk about the kind of the science behind sleep, and then we'll go on to sleep cues, and we'll go on to sleep cycles, and I'll answer lots of questions. So please feel free to fill your questions in as I'm going along. I won't ignore you, I will flip back. So as humans, we have something called a circadian rhythm. So that's circadian rhythm. So what that is, that's our internal body clock. So babies do not have this. They have no idea between night and day. So it's our job as their parents to teach them the difference between night and day. So this is when I talk about things like sleep cues, sleep association. So we're introducing things like a darkened room for a baby when it's nighttime, a quiet environment. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, melatonin, which is the hormone that is produced to encourage sleep, is not produced by a baby until about 12 weeks. So a baby will not, scientifically proven, will not self-settle at all before 12 weeks. There is no hormone within that baby's body that is going to give it like the kind of sleepy hormone as such. So self-settling, shoot me down if I'm wrong, but I am not, I don't personally agree there's such thing as self-settling with a baby. Imagine as an adult, if you're in a very, very emotionally distressed state, I'm not talking just something silly, I'm talking a very emotionally distressed state, trying to calm yourself down. As an adult, that's very, very difficult. So imagine what that's like for a child. They don't have a developed brain enough to rationalize things like emotions. They can't regulate their own temperatures. So self-settling is a little bit of I don't want to say a myth, because some babies are a little bit calmer, and things like cry it out can be used, which is where you do kind of controlled crying. You allow the baby to cry for, say, 10 minutes, and you return, then 20 minutes, then you return. It does work on some babies. I personally wouldn't recommend it myself, but I know it does work. So if that's something you feel would work for you, there's some really good books out there you can read by numerous authors. I'm going to come back to this few questions there. So by 12 weeks, babies will be producing the melatonin hormone. So what that means is they will start to distinguish between night and day. But in the meantime, we need to bring into effect sleep associations for babies. So in a minute, I will talk about positive sleep associations and negative sleep associations. If you do have a pen and paper handy, jot them down, because they are quite interesting as to what might be a negative sleep association that you might be using, and we're going to talk about ways to get rid of that sleep association. Sleep cycles is the next thing. So as humans, we go through sleep cycles. So we go through, we're awake, and then we're asleep, and then we go into a deeper sleep, then we wake again. Naturally, this is all of us in the night when we kind of wake again, sleep, wake, sleep, wake, sleep. A sleep cycle is approximately 30 to 50 minutes. So what that means, I have a lot of people ask me questions. They'll say, I can't get my baby to sleep beyond 30 minutes. Well, that will be because your baby's sleep cycle is 30 minutes. So ideally what you need to be doing is you need to be going into that baby at the 25-minute mark and using various techniques which we'll go through to prevent them from going to that wake cycle. So you need to hit it, you need to nip it in the bud before it hits that wake period and get them back into the next sleep cycle. But bear in mind, their sleep cycle's 30 minutes. They're going to kind of rise again slightly 30 minutes later. Some babies will have a sleep cycle of 45 minutes, 50 minutes. They might naturally sleep through the first kind of wakeful period, in which case you might get an hour, you might get an hour and a half. But work out what your baby's sleep cycle is. So next time they're doing things like waking, make a note of when they're waking. So are they waking after 35 minutes? So write that down, 35 minutes. Sometimes they're not waking for an hour and 10 minutes. So that would be 35 minutes worth. So that'll be 2 sleep cycles worth. So work out what your baby's sleep cycles are. With twins, they are not necessarily going to have the same sleep cycles. I know Frankie and Maisie don't. Maisie's sleep cycle is a lot longer than Frankie's. Hers is around 50 minutes, maybe slightly more. So naturally, if I put her down for a nap, she's not going to wake until about 50 minutes roughly. So if I hear her any kind of stirring at 45 minutes, I'll go and nip that in the bud and get her back into the next sleep cycle, and she'll go another 50 minutes. Frankie, however, he's about 30 minutes, if that. So quite often for his naps, I will go in and intercept his wakeful period. So I'll go in after about 25 minutes, make sure he's got his dummy, make sure he's not kind of moving around, perhaps put my hand on him, just so he kind of relaxes and goes back into his next sleep cycle. This isn't all the time. As they get older, they will naturally sleep for longer. But that might give you kind of an answer to the question of why they're only sleeping for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 45. It's because that's what their sleep cycle timing is. So start writing these things down and it will start making a pattern, and then intercept that wakeful period 5 minutes before their sleep cycle limit. So does that make sense? Hopefully. Let's flick through some questions. If they cry when you put them down, do you lift them up or put your hand on their chest? It varies. So I don't know how old your babies are. So with Maisie, I know she makes a lot of noise when we put her down. She cries, and she probably cries for about 30 or 40 seconds, and it's just the way she kind of goes off. She fights her sleep. So in the early days, I would pick her up, but I've realised now it's just the way she is, and she will go off. She will go to sleep within about a minute or so. Frankie, however, is a different kettle of fish. Frankie's not a great sleeper. He is woken. He's quite a light sleeper. He's woken by a lot of things. If he can't be put down crying, because he will not. He's crying for a reason, because he wants to be picked up again, or he's in pain, or he's too warm, too cold, etc., etc. Maisie just makes noise. So try and determine whether it's just your baby making noise, because it might be, because some babies are quite noisy when they kind of get themselves off to sleep. Maybe for a minute or two, leave them for a minute or two, see if they settle themselves. Is it okay for babies to catnap during the day? If it's working for you, yeah, absolutely. There's no right or wrong. And like I said at the beginning, things have got to work for your family, because everybody's really different. Also, everybody, one really important thing to stress is that I've just seen Jim walk by, which means Frankie's probably dropped off to sleep. Really important thing to stress is a phrase I like to tell people: sleep promotes sleep. So the more sleep they have during the day, or the better, sorry, not the more, the better quality sleep they have during the day, the better their sleep will be at night. It is a bit of a load of old rubbish that if they're tired, really tired, oh, they haven't slept much today, then they'll sleep better at night. They might, but it's going to take you a lot longer to get them down to sleep. They're going to be very overtired. Like I say, babies don't have a self-settle button, so it's going to take you a lot longer to settle them. You might, by chance, every now and again, if they've had a bad day's sleep, they'll coincidentally sleep really well, but it is just that, it's coincidence. Sleep promotes sleep, so really important, remember that. But obviously with their last nap before their bedtime, try not to make it too close to their bedtime, so probably no closer than about 2 hours if possible. Do they outgrow sleep cycles? Before would always wake 30 minutes, now sleeps roughly an hour and a half following your techniques, so don't go anymore, or should you still go in and intercept? I'm glad it's working for you, that's really nice to hear. No, so sleep cycles will always exist. Always exist, but we just learn to kind of go through them. So even me, you, 104-year-old Doris out there somewhere, we all have sleep cycles. So I have no clue what mine is now, because as an adult I go to sleep and that's it, don't think about it. But naturally, I don't know, some people use sleep apps on themselves. I've used sleep apps in the past where you put your phone near you and it kind of senses how you move around in bed. That's your sleep cycle, because you go into, a deep sleep, and then there's REM, so rapid eye movement, so you dream, and then you're nearly awake, and then you fall asleep again. So no, they don't outgrow sleep cycles as such, they just become better sleepers. So like you say, you've gone from 30 minutes where they're now doing an hour and a half, they're still in 30-minute cycles, because you see it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. So those sleep cycles are still there. I think my two have random sleep cycles, as sometimes they'll only nap for 10 minutes and sometimes 2 to 3 hours without me doing a thing. But mostly since teething. Teething is just something else, honestly. So sometimes they'll only nap for 10 minutes, sometimes 2 to 3 hours. Keep listening, we're going to talk about sleep cues, so that might kind of help you kind of understand. But if it's working, like I say, if it's working for you, don't go against it, don't change, don't fix something that ain't broken, kind of thing. Well, I wish I could convince my mum of this. Whenever she looks after them, she keeps them up thinking she's doing me a favour. I know it's a really hard one, and it's a really hard one to approach people on, because they're trying to be helpful, but unfortunately it backfires. My twins have 10 to 15 minutes 2 to 3 times a day, and then sleep a long block at night. If that works for you, fantastic. Some babies do just genuinely need less sleep. It's just the way it is. So that's really great that that's happening. My boys were having just the one long sleep, but then I started waking them after an hour, and then let them have another half-hour nap around 3ish, and they started sleeping better. Yeah, see, often a couple of naps does tend to work better, just because it's kind of more broken up, because you will see with these sleep cues we talk about that babies can become very overly tired easily. My girls have 3 naps of about 45 minutes a day, but will not sleep at night. They're always waking so tired and exhausted through the day. Help, 2 little beans. Okay, send me how old they are. Yeah, that's true, sleep well at night, so just go with what works for you. Right, so we're going to crack on, and we're going to talk about sleep associations. So if you've got pen and paper ready, let's talk about sleep associations. We'll try and remember these. So sleep associations are things that can help you aid your babies to sleep. You're going to be very, very familiar with a lot of these I'm going to list. But you're also going to perhaps there'll be a few in there that you're not familiar with. So let's talk about positive sleep associations. With sleep associations, always use something that you can maintain. So white noise. So there's lots of apps on the phone you can get. There's things like You and the Sheep. There's other various kind of teddies that have the white noise complaint. White noise is a very positive thing to use. Shushing your babies. That's something that's very similar to white noise. Lullabies, so singing to your babies, that's very reassuring. Swaddling, some people agree, some people don't. I personally, I do like swaddling, certainly until a baby can roll, only because in those early weeks a baby has something called startle reflex. I don't know if you, before you got discharged from hospital, it's likely a doctor did a startle reflex test, which is where they hold their baby and they say to you, I'm not going to hurt them, and they kind of drop them and the baby goes, oh, and it kind of shudders. They want to see that baby's got a startle reflex. So what I think swaddling does is, because you're keeping that baby's arms nice and tight, the baby is not going to be woken by a startle reflex, and the startle reflex can happen a few times an hour. So imagine if the baby in the certain early weeks startles in their sleep, it's likely they will wake themselves. Darkened rooms, that's really, really important. Our mornings and evenings are lighter at the moment. Any slight chinks of light, especially after that 12-week period, where melatonin is beginning to be produced and they're beginning to understand the difference between night and day. If it's getting light around 5 a.m, which it is at the moment, you do not want any light coming into that baby's room, because a baby will think, oh, daytime, wakey wakey. And lots of people have asked me why my babies wake at 5 a.m. That's not just the reason, but have a look and make sure there's no light kind of coming in for them all of a sudden. Bath time's a really good one. Obviously in the first few weeks you're not going to be bathing your baby every day. It's really important not to, because their skin's very, very delicate. But as time goes on, bathing is a great sleep association. However, do not do it within about an hour of bedtime. Certainly for babies under about a year of age, only because babies cannot regulate their body temperatures correctly. So if that bath water is, obviously body temperature is about 37 degrees. So if that bath water is 38, 39 degrees, let's say, that baby has got to try and get its temperature back to 37, or you've got to get its temperature back to 37, so it will sleep more effectively. So give the baby about an hour to kind of get its temperature back down, so it's not too hot or too cold. Story time. It's not something Maisie and Frankie even care about at the moment. I don't know why. I try to read them stories. Obviously story time is very positive, and that's something that you can share with others as well. And feeding, of course. So milk is a great sleep association before bed. So whether you're breastfeeding, and with breastfeeding it's very comforting for the baby as well, as is bottle feeding. That's a great sleep association before bedtime. So those are kind of your positive ones. Let me talk about negative sleep associations. Okay, this I say, and I don't want people thinking I'm an absolute bitch by saying this, but if you're in those early weeks, or you've got twins or multiples, I would highly recommend not to rock your babies. So let's talk about twins and multiples. So the reason I say don't rock your babies is because imagine your partner has gone out and you've got two screaming infants on your hands, and all that they will, the only way they will go to sleep is by being rocked. You cannot physically rock two babies at once. It's just not going to happen, or it's not maintainable for longer than a minute or so, and then one of them drops off, the other one doesn't. So really important not to rock. Something I found really, really hard when I first had them, and obviously these are my first children, so I was not going to be in the habit of rocking, so from day one I didn't rock. However, naturally when visitors come round, they rock your babies, and one thing I found so hard telling not to do was saying, please don't rock my babies. And they kind of look at me as if to say, like, why? And then you explain to them and it makes total sense. So rocking, if you can avoid it, do. Driving. So this is one. I know a few people who have to drive their babies around to get them to sleep. And we're talking 18-month-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds who will not go to sleep without being driven around in a car. We've all kind of been there when babies are exhausted. What can I do to get them to sleep? Stick them in the car, babies go to sleep, magic. That's not maintainable every day, of course. So driving, don't get in the habit of using that as something for their main sleep, of getting them off to sleep. Pushing them around in a pram. Obviously, you're going to push them around in a pram when you're out and about. But don't get in the habit of them relying on being pushed in a pram or walked around to get to sleep. When we were on holiday recently, if we were out with the babies and they were crying, because babies cry, people would say, oh, do you want me to walk them around? I'd have to say, no, please don't. Like, we're literally going to, the pram stays still. Because it's not maintainable long term. If you're out for dinner with people, or out for lunch, do you want to be saying, oh, sorry, excuse me, I've just got to leave the table and go and walk my baby around the block for 10 minutes? It's just, it's not maintainable. So let's talk about how we can remove a negative sleep association and introduce a positive one. So let's talk about rocking. So if you are currently rocking your baby to sleep and you need to remove that sleep association, what you're going to do is you're going to introduce 2 other positive sleep associations at the same time. You're going to carry on rocking your baby and you're going to do this for a minimum of about 2 weeks. Any changes you make with a baby's habits, you need to persevere for a couple of weeks. It can be very frustrating, it can be very soul destroying, trying to break habits. You can feel like giving up, oh, this isn't worth it, I'll just rock them forever. But believe me, hard work pays off. So say we're rocking our baby, we're also going to introduce to them darkened room and white noise. So you'll go into a darkened room, you'll rock your baby and you'll have white noise at the same time. So the baby will start getting used to a positive sleep association. So they'll start getting used to the white noise. Then what you're gradually going to do from about let's say day 10 onwards, is you're going to slow down your rocking. So you're going to really, really slow it down. Baby's still hopefully going to be soothed by the white noise. And then come day 14, you should be able to really slow that right down and stop rocking that baby. Same with things like driving. So if you're having to drive your baby around, because I've had a few people ask me how they can remove that as a sleep association, play some white noise while you're in the car. White noise is great. Newborn babies, so babies under about 12 weeks old, they can't tolerate being awake for more than an hour to an hour and a half. So lots of people have said, why are they awake, or why are they asleep all the time? It's because they can't tolerate. You also need to find out with your baby. So I know with Maisie and Frankie, they cannot stay awake for more than about 2.5, 3 hours without turning into absolute monsters. So again, when I was talking about sleep cycles and identifying the length of sleep cycle, identify how long your baby can stay awake for. So we're going to talk about sleep cues. So what you need to do to work out how long your baby can stay awake for, like their maximum wake time, is you're going to set a stop clock from the time your baby wakes up from, say, a morning nap. And then you're going to look out for certain sleep cues. So bear with me, I'm going back to my notes. If anyone's got any questions, keep asking. I will come back to them before the end. I've got lots here. Okay. We have to look. Took Saints Milky's time. Seems to work now they're older. Totally. I'll say to the babies, do you want your bottle? and they know what they're talking about. Is it bad to keep white noise playing all night? No, not necessarily. There's nothing wrong with that. Perhaps keep it really low level. Definitely recommend Ewan. Ewan's great. We love Ewan. With swaddles, is it better to get the wrap you wrap around yourself or the ones that close with its own fastener? Okay, so there's quite a few different brands out there on the market. You have to be really careful when swaddling of babies' hips. Hips need to be left loose, especially with twins and multiples. Things like hip dysplasia can be quite common because of their cramped space while in the womb. So something you need to be really careful with. So when I teach people how to swaddle, I use sheets. I don't buy those expensive swaddles. They're good. They're good for a purpose, but you can get swaddle sheets that are very, very effective. If you go on my Instagram TV, I think if you go on my page and then click on Instagram TV, there's a video on how to swaddle correctly. So have a look at that one. Once your baby is able to roll, you must stop swaddling with their arms in. That's so important. Also, how do you know the baby has enough covering so they don't get cold during the night? So get one of those just like temperature gauges. There's lots of things. I think there's something called the Egg out there, or you can get just go in Mothercare, someone like that, and they do like a cardboard thermometer, and it will tell you the temperature in the room. So ideally they need to be kind of probably around 18 to 20 degrees within a room. I'd always say dress a layer more than what you'd wear in bed. And obviously as we're warming up now, as the weather's warming up, you're going to need to wear less layers. I'm going to come back to a few questions in a minute. Let's talk about sleep cues. So you're setting your clock from the time your baby wakes up from their nap, and you're then going to look out for sleep cues of a baby. So get a pen ready if you want, because we're going to talk about early sleep cues and late sleep cues. So the difference between the two: an early sleep cue is the baby's first signs of them telling you, I'm tired, I need to go to bed. Late sleep cues are when you have probably missed the boat and you're going to have a baby that's difficult to get to sleep. So let's talk early sleep cues. When you see this, when you see any of these sleep cues, you get that baby in bed. Yawning, fussing. If the baby starts losing interest, so perhaps you're playing and they start gazing away, losing interest, turning their face away from you, waving their arms and legs around, flapping their arms around. If they go a little bit pale or a little bit quiet, really key sign of an early sleep cue is red eyebrows. So have a look for that one. I'm sure now I've said it, you will notice it. Red eyebrows. That's a tired baby that wants to go to bed. So those are your early sleep cues. So if you see any of those, you get them to bed. Yawning, fussing, losing interest, turning their face away, flapping their arms around. If they're pale, if they're quiet, or if their eyebrows are red. It doesn't need to be all of those. It can be one, it can be all, it can be two or three. Let's talk about late sleep cues. So late sleep cues are cues that you do not want to be seeing. It could be too late. And I don't say too late as if they're not going to sleep, but it's going to be more difficult of a job for you to get them to sleep. If they're arching their back, that's a late sleep cue. That baby is overtired. They're doing that out of frustration. If they've just been fed, it can be slightly different because it might be that it's gas. But it's just during the day and they've been playing, they're arching their back. That's a sign that they are absolutely exhausted and need to sleep. Not wanting to be put down. That's too late. So people will say to me, I go to put them down and they just don't want to be put down. That's because you've missed the boat and you need to go back to looking for these early sleep cues. Rubbing their eyes, rubbing their face. So rubbing their face with the hands, but often rubbing their face on you. So I'm sure you're all quite familiar with kind of nose rubbing on you, kind of nuzzling into you. That's a late sleep cue that's saying, Mummy, I'm exhausted, I need to go to bed. Crying. So crying is a late sleep cue. So a tired baby should not be a crying baby. Pulling of the ears. Sorry, Benny's just joined. Pulling of the ears. So any of those, so back arching, not wanting to be put down, rubbing their eyes, rubbing their face, either themselves or on you. crying or pulling of the ears. So again, not necessarily all of them, or just one of them or two of them. It can be any of those. So to work out the maximum time your baby can stay awake at the moment, like I said, set your clock from the time they wake up from a nap, and then until the time when you see those early sleep cues of yawning, fussing, gazing away, red eyebrows, etc. And that is the maximum time your baby should stay awake. So say it was 2 hours, for example, around the hour and 50 mark, you need to be winding them down, getting a good sleep association in place. So introducing things like your white noise or singing lullaby to them, or start reading a story, and moving them towards their bed. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to answer a few questions. But before I do that, let me just give a few kind of the latest guidelines for safe sleeping. Benny is attacking my bed. Always sleep the baby on their back. Reason behind this, quite interesting, is because a baby, if they sleep on their front, they will actually sleep deeper. So what that means, essentially, if there's an underlying issue, and the baby's in a very, very deep sleep, they may not wake up. So there's an increased risk of SIDS for a baby sleeping on their front. So they will sleep more deeply on their front, but baby on their back is safer. Feet to foot, so feet to the foot of the bed, so that if they've got any blankets, they can't wriggle underneath them. There's nowhere to wriggle to. Temperature between 16 and 20 approximately in the room. Babies can't regulate their temperature until about 2 years of age, so until they're quite old actually. Empty cot, so nothing but a blanket in there. Obviously as they get older, things like teddies and stuff obviously do start being introduced, but certainly no pillows at all until they're at least a year old. Being in the same room as you until they're 6 months old. And another one is dummies, and I'm not saying give your baby a dummy, but Lullaby Trust, who kind of, they do all these safe sleeping guidelines, it has been proven that using dummies actually lowers the risk of sudden death syndrome. So I'm not saying to use them, I'm just saying that dummies, a lot of people say, oh yeah, use a dummy, but a dummy isn't necessarily a negative thing. So actually, talking about dummies, let's go on to the questions, because I will probably say I had about 15-20 questions on dummies. And in this household, we are dummy experts because we had an absolute mare with dummies. How we tackled it. So what was happening is our babies were sleeping really, really well, but they're waking because they've dropped their dummy. The dummies come out of their mouth. Unfortunately, in the early weeks when they can't kind of reach for them themselves, you just kind of have to, we just dealt with it, I guess. What we did introduce though, which did seem to work and does really, really, really help, don't get me wrong, I do get up every now and again to put a dummy in, is we put a few in the cot, strategically placed, so that the chances are they will find a dummy themselves. That may seem really a silly thing to say, but it's certainly something that really worked for us. And another thing that really helped is reducing the amount of time that they were using a dummy during the day. So we literally overnight said to them, no dummies during the day unless they are in the car or they're sleeping. That's it, no dummies. We went cold turkey. And actually the difference we saw of the nighttime waking for dummies was pretty much instant, or maybe a few days. So perhaps reduce the use of a dummy during the day and drop a few around the cot. It's a really, really hard one with dummies. And then you even just go cold turkey. I wouldn't recommend things like dummy clips. We use dummy clips during the day, but they're certainly not safe at night. Yeah, it's a hard one. If anyone's got any other tips, send them through so I can perhaps repeat this to people, and it might help me out as well. Let's answer some questions. When do I stop waking the other twin up to feed? My twins are 11 weeks old. Okay, so I'd probably say if they're gaining about 4 ounces a week in weight and they weren't very early premature, so I'm talking pre-32 weeks, then let them sleep. by about this point if they're happy to. However, you do need to make sure they're having enough calories during the day. Obviously, if they're breastfeeding, it's on demand, so your body will be giving them the nutrients they need. If you are formula feeding, go onto my Instagram page and go through to my highlights, and there is a milk feeding charts, and they're by weight, so it's a recommended milk that you need to give your baby in a 24-hour period. So if they do drop that, if they're not waking up for that feed, make sure that the other feeds throughout the rest of the feed, they have a little bit extra for their weight. So on the charts you'll see it goes from about £6, £7 up to £13 babies by pound and by ounce as to how much formula you should be giving them in a 24-hour period. It is a guide, but it's much better to work it out by weight. Another thing I will say to people is please weigh your babies weekly. Go and get yourself some really, really cheap kitchen scales, and pop your baby in an empty baby bath, put them on those scales and weigh them weekly, and adapt your feeding routine. If you're formula feeding, adapt your feeding routine according to their weight. There's no point waiting 2 or 3 or 4 weeks for your health visitor, because your baby might have put 2 pounds on in that point, and they perhaps won't be getting enough milk, which in turn, if we go back to our 4 pillars, so we've got feeding, sleeping, love and warmth. If their feeding is suffering, if they're not having quite enough calories during the day, your sleeping is going to suffer. So weigh them weekly. Best way to get baby down to sleep in the day without being rocked. So we talked about sleep associations. If babies have never used white noise before, would 9 months be too late to introduce? No, absolutely not. No, definitely. You can definitely introduce it. Baby is fighting sleep. How do we overcome this? So I would imagine if you've just listened to my sleep cues that you're perhaps missing those early sleep cues. So re-look at those early sleep cues and put them in bed as soon as you're seeing those. Sorry, I've got lots of questions written down here. Babies go 7 or 8 hours, last feed at 8 o'clock. Is that okay? Yeah, absolutely. I think I checked the age of them actually. Babies that are really under about 4 months old and gaining less than 4 ounces a week, they do need to have that middle of the night feed. It's really important. I get asked all the time, how can I get my babies to sleep through? Now, please bear in mind that sleeping through is classed as a 6-hour period. So that could be from 12 p.m. until 6 p.m. My babies slept through from about 6 weeks. When I say slept through, they were having a late last feed. So they weren't sleeping 7 till 7, they were going a 6-hour block. So I was getting 6 hours solid sleep. So all those people say, oh, your baby's sleeping through. If they're sleeping 6 hours, they're sleeping through. 90% of babies under the age of 18 months do not sleep through. So if that makes you feel any better, yeah, those are the statistics. And I say sleeping through, it's because they're still having night wakes, things like that. Maisie and Frankie now go, apart from tonight, they go from about 7 o'clock until about 6 a.m. I wish it would go a bit longer than 6 a.m. Sometimes it does, sometimes it goes to 7. It's potluck. But we have had a bit of night waking recently, which has been caused by teeth. Teething is a massive one when it comes to sleep. So when baby will wake often because they're in pain or because they need comfort. Maisie's fine with her teeth. Frankie is, we do joke with him, we say stop being a pussy, but bless his little heart, they must really, really be hurting him because he will wake up and scream. It's a hard one. Also, you have situations which I hate using the word because it's not a regression. The 4-month sleep regression, the 8-month sleep regression, the year sleep regression, they're not regressions. The definition of a regression is going back. You may, around the 4-month period, so around 16, 17, 18 weeks, have what's called a sleep regression. I call it sleep development. This is where your baby is going on to a new way of sleeping. They're going into a more adult state of sleeping, but they're having a lot of developmental changes happen at that point. So at about 4 months old, they're beginning to perhaps roll over. They're more aware of their surroundings. They interact much more with people. So they're learning lots and lots of new skills. So imagine when you go on a training course and you've had a day that's absolutely action-packed. You go to bed and your mind's just alive with all these ideas. That's basically what's happening to our babies at the 4-month period. All these circuits in their brains are beginning to fire. Ride it out. That's all I'll say. It normally takes a couple of weeks. You may find they're a little bit more difficult to settle. You may find you have night waking, but it's a developmental change. So it's a sleep development. Please, let's spread the word that it's development. Let's not scare all these mums out there that it's a regression. It can be hard, yes, but you're going on to better things. Then come 8 months, you have another developmental leap, which is generally around the time when a baby's crawling. They're cruising around furniture. They have a whole new world again, and also teeth. So around the 8-month time, you may feel you're going backwards again with the sleep, but you go back 1 step backwards, 2 steps forward. So just kind of ride it out. Somebody else asked me a question. A 16-month-old's waking in the night again. Now, could be a number of things. So could be, I don't know, you said month-old, so they're obviously twins. How premature were they? This could be a sleep development leap that they're going through, because they just started walking perhaps. If it is a case of them just started walking, then this can really affect their sleep pattern again, because they're learning all these new things. So all the energy is going into learning to walk and finding this whole new world around them. That sleep can suffer a little bit. But also what happens around 16 months-ish, so between 12 and 18 months, is babies start dreaming quite differently. So you may find that it might be a little bit nightmares that are happening. So if that is the case, if they're waking up and they're kind of frightened, reassure them. But one thing I will say, if you do think it is bad dreams, don't touch them as much as you can. Because imagine if you were having a bad dream and your partner turned around, she went, "Oh, what's wrong?" Like, put your hands on you. So just try and use your voice to settle them again. Hopefully it is a developmental stage they're going through, or likely the dreaming one. But private message me if you like and we talk further about it. So somebody said, how to get them to sleep through the night. I'm a massive supporter of being very, very baby-led when it comes to sleeping through the night. There are lots of techniques that I can talk about with people. So first thing, so let's talk about our 4 pillars again. Oh my god, my nail varnish is terrible. I'm going away next weekend. Our 4 pillars. So we've got sleep, so we've got food, so we've got warmth, and so we've got love. You need to make sure all of those boxes are ticked before that baby is kind of even thinking about sleeping through the night. The main one is food, so make sure they're getting enough nutrients throughout the day. So if you're breastfeeding, obviously you will naturally be giving them enough, because your breasts will produce enough milk for your babies. They kind of produce what they need to. Formula feeding, have a look on my charts, make sure they are having enough milk. That's really, really important. And again, I'm going back to it because I will bang on about it to people all day long. Weigh your babies. I think on my highlights I've got a thing about how to weigh your babies, so do go on to that. I would say certainly around the 3-month mark, 4-month mark. So you're probably talking 14, let's say 14 to 17 weeks. Babies will look at, so around 17 weeks you can perhaps look at weaning slightly, so introducing food, and you will find babies will naturally, they will start sleeping for longer lengths once they start being weaned. But the reason babies wake in the night is for safety, and that's really important. So I really don't like these forced techniques that people use, like pumping full of milk. Yes, you can increase the last feed slightly. I'm more than happy to put that on a story about how that can be done. But certainly I hear people, you know, pumping the babies full of milk or withholding naps from a baby to try and make them sleep for longer. Babies wake for safety, and if there was ever an underlying issue with your baby that you weren't aware of and you force them into that sleep, it can be very, very dangerous. So I can talk about, perhaps I'll do another blog in the next few days about little tips we can use for encouraging sleeping through, but we need to also encourage waking at the same time. That's a really important message we've got to get out there, because it is very, very important for a baby's safety. You will get your sleep back, I promise. Co-sleeping, what's my thoughts? So I didn't clarify with you before this live. So co-sleeping is 2 types of co-sleeping. Sleeping with the babies in the bed with you, which is fine as long as it's done safely. And the other thing, co-sleeping, I think you might mean co-sleeping as in your twins sleeping together maybe, which I'm totally support, absolutely. They were in you together, so there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be in the same cot with each other. They'll reassure each other, they help regulate each other's breathing, each other's temperature. So I'm a massive, massive fan of co-sleeping for twins. Co-sleeping is in the 2 of them in a cot together until they outgrow it. I've only got a few minutes left on this live, so I might have to kind of go live again, or I don't know. Let's see how this works out. Let me answer the last few questions, and then questions I haven't covered, I'll cover in my stories after this, because I've literally got 3 minutes left. How do I get my twins to sleep better after a night feed? I really struggle to get them back down. Katie, it depends how much you're kind of feeding in a night feed. Often a night feed can be just kind of a bit of a top up. So I'm not talking like 2 or 3 ounces necessarily, but when you're onto bigger feeds, message me and I'll talk to you about certain amounts. Obviously, if you're breastfeeding, that's totally different. But you need to keep them in the same environment. So you need to keep the room dark, you need to keep it quiet, introduce some sleep association. So again, perhaps have some white noise playing while they're being fed, so they're kind of still in a very kind of sleepy state. I can't deal with people rocking my twins when I'm not looking. Doesn't help me when I'm by myself. Nicole, that is so true. It drives me absolutely bonkers. Slowing down rocking helped us talk together. Now we put her down awake and she falls asleep without crying. So thank you. Oh, you're welcome. What age would you start sleep training? My twins are 8 weeks old but 3 days adjusted, so still very young, and wake every 4 hours for feeds. So I don't sleep train as such, because I do it very kind of baby led. But I say start now, go for it, start with a routine. Again, I'm going to have lots of private messages. Julie, message me. I'm more than happy to talk through a few ideas with you. I've got 2 minutes remaining. Sorry. How many or length of naps for a 9-month-old? Probably 2, probably a short one in the morning and a long one in the afternoon. How long would you keep them listening to white noise for as they grow up? As long as they're happy with it. If they're still 18 listening to white noise and they're sleeping, then hey ho. Can hear Benny going mad. He's now quiet, little shit. Is it okay for a 4-month-old to sleep in the home room? Trying for the first time tonight, she seems to go down better. As I am qualified, I should say to you, sleep guidelines are 6 months. However, I know people do what works for them. So I would be, if I was looking after you as a client, I would advise, obviously the guidelines are 6 months, but I'd be fully supportive of whatever decision you make for your family and what works for you and what works for your babies. What if the twins are ready to nap at different times? Really good question. Likely that they'll be within about half an hour of each other. So just keep one up a little bit longer. No, they are on next week. Oh, talk about taking away dummies. I'll answer these questions in stories, I promise, because I've got 34 seconds left. We use dummies to help them get to sleep and then take them out once they're sleeping. That's a really great idea. I might try that. When should you stop calculating feeds? When they are established on their weaning, and once they're having 3 meals a day, they need to have a minimum of 17 ounces of milk. Formula feed in 3 meals a day, when to drop the afternoon feed, baby led, allow them to. Guys, I'm really sorry, totally run out of time. I will catch up on your stories in a minute.